Hi, everybody. This is Christine Drechsler. I want to welcome you all to our 6th session of Parenting University, and I want to thank His Eminence and the Chicago Metropolis for helping us host our first remote session. Parenting University is designed to offer Orthodox families perspective and inspiration to help them in their parenting journey. Tonight's presentation will be a great inspiration to all of us, and I also want to just take a quick moment to mention for you to mark your calendars for our next session. October 16th will be our next session. We're excited to host Dr. Randa Anderson for a presentation entitled Meeting Today's Challenges, How to Thrive, Not Just Survive. So now I will introduce Father Sam Dimitriou, who's our spiritual director, and he's from the parish of Assumption in Homer, Glen, to introduce our special speaker tonight.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Family Synaxis and Parenting U, I welcome all of you tonight to our first session of the fall and of the new ecclesiastical year. We are humbled and blessed to have with us this evening His Eminence Metropolitan Nathanael of Chicago. Before I introduce His Eminence, I just wanted to share with you a little biography of His Eminence. His Eminence Metropolitan Nathanael is the second Metropolitan to preside over our metropolis, which consists of 58 parishes, 2 monastic communities. He was unanimously elected Metropolitan of our metropolis, succeeding His Eminence Metropolitan Jacobus of blessed memory by the Holy Sacred Synod of the Ecumenical Patriarchate of February 7th, 2018. He was ordained a bishop at the cathedral in New York on March 17th, 2018. 1 week later, he arrived here in Chicago and was made our beloved Metropolitan on the eve of the Annunciation on March 24th. His Eminence is the graduate of Hellenic College Holy Cross. He's also earned a Master's of Sacred Theology and a Doctor of Theology and Bioethics from Boston University. He's also studied history and ethics and public health and, at Columbia University. He served as a guest professor and lecturer at St. Vladimir's Theological Seminary, at Holy Cross School of Theology, and has authored and delivered numerous articles and presentations on theology and bioethics. His Eminence is a fervent advocate of human rights. He coronated the Archdiocesan commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the March in Selma, Alabama in 2015, and has represented the Archdiocese, the National Council of Churches Special Task Force to End Racism in America. As a parish priest in Manhattan, he developed a unique urban ministry called OPA, Young Orthodox Professionals in Action. And it provided more than 400 young professionals the opportunity to minister to the most vulnerable members of society. Accolades of what he did before he came to our metropolis goes on and on. But since his enthronement here in Chicago, His Eminence has started a new chapter for all of us. He has launched a strategic planning initiative to encourage a transformation among us here in Chicago, amongst the parishioners and parishes. He's pursued efforts to engage the young adults, engaging them, and through this, he has formed a young adult junior board. Besides this board, His Eminence has created many new ministries. Most recently, His Eminence seeing those who are suffering across our whole metropolis from this pandemic, has established the COVID-19 Parish Relief Fund and Research Stage. Not only that, but we have now, through his efforts, Orthodox grocery store, which helps those who are in need to go to this store, are able to go shopping and not worry about paying the bill. As our spiritual father and shepherd, Eminence leads with faith, love, and humility. And again, there's so much we can say about His Eminence that I would take up the whole night. We're not here for that. I'm here just to introduce Your Eminence. So, Your Eminence, we're blessed to have you with us this evening. May our Lord grant you many years as our spiritual father and shepherd. So I give the floor or the computer screen to you. In Jesus.
Thank you. Thank you, Father Timitriou. Everyone, good evening. I was hoping you would stop at some point because it was getting kind of embarrassing listening to some of the things you said. Everyone, good evening. I thank you all for joining us this evening. I think we can begin our discussion tonight with prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. O Heavenly King, Comforter, the Spirit of truth, present everywhere and filling all things, the treasury of good and the giver of life, come and abide in us and cleanse us from our sins and save our souls, O good one. Amen. So I want to, before we begin, just apologize ahead of time because I have no clue if you can all hear me. We're in the age of Zoom and Skype and Friends and Teams and all this other these digital platforms, and sometimes we speak and we think people can hear us, and oftentimes they can't, and maybe that's where they're better off if they can't hear us. It's like when we give a sermon and it's not really a good sermon, but the microphone is off, so it doesn't really matter. So people think you're saying something good because you're smiling. But they can't hear you. So I apologize in advance if we have some technical difficulties along the way. Normally, we would have liked to do this in person to have an opportunity to meet and greet each other. But I also think the fact that we're doing this tonight via Zoom offers participants from different parts of our metropolis the opportunity to actually participate. The faithful from the different 6 states of our metropolis, the chance to connect. We may even have some people from other parts of our country, other metropolises, or other parts of the world, and that's a great blessing for us to share the evening together and to learn from one another. I really appreciate the fact that there are some clergy on the call as well, and I will just say that it's very humbling to be asked to speak about anything for that matter from a ministry that's called Parenting University. I think those of you who are parents, have children, are expecting children, are far more advanced in parenting than I am. I'm a spiritual father. I'm a shepherd. And in many ways, you're all my children, but those of you who have a spouse and children at home have experiences that I do not. And so if I say something that is not right or not accurate, it doesn't really capture what's happening in your home. I apologize, and I encourage you to correct me, to offer difference of opinions tonight. It's going to be not a lecture, but I hope that we can have a conversation. When I was asked to speak this evening by the family Synaxis group and to talk about the home as our church and how do we do this in the age of pandemic, I remembered and I recalled an experience I had as a newly ordained young deacon. 2004. I was in Boston, and at the time I was serving the metropolis of Boston. I was a graduate student at Boston University, and there was a hierarch who was visiting Boston. He was at Mass General, I believe, one of the hospitals in Boston, who had come with a number of clergymen and some of his support staff because he was to undergo some serious surgery, a procedure that could only be performed here in America. And so he came over, and he was not able to speak. He had some sort of procedure in his throat at some point, and he lost the ability to speak. But those around him knew how to communicate with him. They could read his lips. And he was a very holy man, Metropolitan Kyrillos of Gortina in Crete. He was a man of prayer and a man of few words. And he was very sensitive. He liked to have people around him. He wanted to really never be left alone in the hospital. He did not know the language. And so he always enjoyed the company of his priests, the company of his relatives who were with him as well. And one night we took turns staying with him in the evenings. And at one point, one of the priests it was very late, and he thought the Metropolitan was sleeping. His eyes were closed, but oftentimes he would do that when he was praying. We would not know if he was awake or sleeping. He often had his eyes closed, and he did that on purpose so that we could sometimes leave the room and not worry if he is looking for us. So he would often close his eyes, and we would go out for a walk or go to the restroom. And it was late. We thought he was sleeping, and the clergyman who was in his room also sat in a chair by the bed, and he started to pray the Jesus prayer. He had his Komboskini, and he was praying it. Before he knew it, he must have been praying for several minutes. He lost track of time and was not really paying attention to the Metropolitan who was in his hospital bed. But he was immersed in his own prayer and struggles in prayer. And at one point he heard, some noise. It was coming from the Metropolitan. He opened his eye. The priest looked up, and it was the Metropolitan yelling at him without words coming out, but really trying to say something to him, trying to get, he was very adamant about what he was saying. He basically was saying, "What are you doing? Why do you have this prayer rope in your hand? Why do you need this prayer rope?" And he said, the priest, shocked at why he was asking him this, he said, "Yeroda, I'm praying. I'm praying the Jesus prayer. I'm praying for you." And he said, "Do you need it? Do you need the prayer rope to pray? Do you need that thing in your hand in order to pray with your heart?" And he said, "I don't understand what you're saying." He said, "What if you didn't have hands? Could you pray? And what if you didn't have a voice? Could you pray?" And that's when the priest realized that he was encouraging him not to depend on that which that was familiar to him, the prayer rope, that the kind of the training wheels. He was trying to help him grow and move beyond that, because ultimately what was important was praying, speaking to God, communicating with him, being united with him in prayer, not the way he was praying, not the how, but the what. And the priest realized that he had a point. Here's a hierarch who was a man of prayer. He could not really get out of his bed. He could not vocalize. He cannot be heard in prayer. He was really at the mercy of others. And he was trying to teach him that not to rely so much on that which we take for granted or have that's very familiar to us. And so when I was asked, how do we go to church? How do we turn our homes into the church when we can't really go to church? What does that look like? I thought of Metropolitan Kyrillos of blessed memory. He passed away, unfortunately, or God willed that he pass away as a fairly young man. And I thought, well, our conversation basically is, how do we go to church? How do we enter the presence of God if we can't always be in the church, the actual na'o, the sanctuary that we're used to? or in any sanctuary at some time. I know that there are families who have yet to go to church, even though our churches are open. Some of them are worried, they're afraid because they're at high risk. We have a clergyman who's at high risk, and he's also very high risk, actually, he and his family, and he has had a hard time going to church, doing the services as a priest, as he was trained with the communicants, with the people in the church. We have parents who are not able to bring their young children or their elderly family members to church. And so how do we, the question is, how can we be in God's presence if we can't go to church? And many of you know the saying of make the home is the small church, St. John Chrysostom, and perhaps other fathers have spoken of our homes being a church, an extension of what we know in the Naol should exist in our homes. And I think, importantly, that could only occur when we understand the church is not just a place, but a mode of being. We are the church. We are the body of Christ. The church exists everywhere we go by virtue of being connected to Christ. And I remember when the COVID pandemic started, we were concerned because people could not go to church and we could not receive the Eucharist. And there were a number of speakers in our Facebook conversations who spoke about what the Desert Fathers do, and during Holy and Great Lent, they don't really receive communion every day. They come back for the Anastasi after spending 40 days in the desert, and then they come and receive the Eucharist. And I think, at the time, I think that message resonated with people. We were hoping that COVID would, end fairly soon, and that we would come back to our churches and go back to normal and receive the Eucharist more often. And even though we are receiving it, the sacrament now today, it still hasn't gone back to normal. But we still don't cease to be the church. Our homes can only be a small church, or the church, when we understand ourselves as the body of Christ, as members of him, and that there's nothing that can separate us from him, as St. Paul says, not even death. If we are forced to stay home, we are still connected to him. And as I think about it, I walk into my home and I think, how does my home reflect the church? It means that the people who are in the church are constantly making an effort to get closer to Christ, or constantly trying to do all of that we do in church, in the Naol, we do it at our homes. That means that we're not just holy when we gather as a community in our sanctuaries, but that we are struggling and trying to be holy in our homes. And we can be holy in our homes when Christ is in our homes, when we have the one who is all holy and we are in his presence. We become holy. So we can become holy if Christ is in our homes. And I look around my home, my mom does a good job of reminding me that this has to be a Christian home. So we have our icon screen. Many of you may have icons in your homes. It's important, if you don't have one, to dedicate a corner of your home or a section of your home. It can be in your bedroom if you don't have a place that you want to make it visible to others. It can be private. It can be in your bedroom. It could be in your living room. It can be, some people dedicate an entire bedroom as a little mini chapel to go in and pray. And it's important to dedicate a space in our homes for prayer, a place to stand before an icon of our Lord and the saints and pray. We do everything in our homes today. Our homes have become our offices. For some, our homes are the doctor's office. Some people are seeing patients from home. Telemedicine occurs now from home. And I think we have to remember that we can't just have a home office or a home hospital, there's some judges that connect to the courtroom via their homes, a courtroom in our homes. We have to have a church in our homes. So please find that space, dedicate time to prayer. I think that many of us are working very late nowadays. In the evenings, you find yourself connecting to meetings, to Zoom meetings at 7:30 p.m. Central Time, and we're having another meeting, another conversation. And before you know it, you've gone from early in the morning, you wake up, if you don't pray in the morning, okay, if your habit is to pray in the evening, I understand that. But if you don't begin your day with prayer, and then you don't take time to pray before a meal because you're in a rush, because you're going in from one meeting to the next, and so you're eating by your computer, and then before you know it, it's 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, and you've been on the computer and telephone most of the day, and you've had dinner and you're tired and you haven't prayed, and then you go to bed and you're exhausted. That's unfortunate, and we should find time to pause. They have these wonderful apps on our phones that remind us, or on your watch, tells you stand. I get a little thing that says time to stand. So if you're sitting for more than an hour, the watch reminds you stand. If you're working in front of a screen, there are apps that kind of give you a nice, beautiful color, and they say time to stretch. And I think that this is an opportunity, as we're working, nonstop, even more so than before. Dedicate time, have a little notification, or if you're disciplined enough and you don't need the notification between your meetings, stand, do your cross, offer a small prayer, visit your icon corner and venerate the icons, open the scriptures, read a few pages or lines even from the scriptures, and so what we normally would do in the church, now you're doing it in your home. I think you could also receive sacraments at home. So if you are not able to go to church to receive any of the sacraments, our clergy have received instructions on how to safely do this now when they can visit your home, offer the Eucharist, or offer any of the sacraments if you're not feeling well, the Holy Unction. Early on, we weren't sure about too much about coronavirus, and now we're learning more and more. And so early on, we were not able to offer these home visits. But now, the clergy have been doing this. They've been visiting hospitals, they've been visiting old age homes, and they've been visiting people at home. So in your home, the sacrament can be brought to you. The priest can come to your home. If you can't visit the church, hear confession, he can bring the Holy Eucharist. If someone is high risk, and they can receive communion at home. And so we can be connected again in the home to the sacramental life of the church. One of the interesting things, as I was speaking to people during the early days of the pandemic, when everything was kind of broadcasted digitally, and there wasn't too many people in church. I think at one point we had 10 people in our churches. We had families who intentionally prepared themselves to watch the service, whether it was the liturgy, Vespers, Great Compline at the time, or whatever service. And some of them said, we get up and we prepare, we wash ourselves, we dress up as if we were going to go to church. And then we sit together as a family and we watch the liturgy. And when the gospel is being read, we know we should stand. We would normally stand in the church. So we stand together as a family, we cross ourselves. When the priest is blessing, we do our cross. And one family, actually, the father said, well, I actually, when the priest, or when we normally would pass the tray, he was a parish council member. When we normally would pass the tray, he says, I actually send my stewardship to my parish. That's when I send it at that time. So you could see people take this seriously, even though they can't be in church, in the sanctuary. It's they're not sitting there in the pajamas, flipping through the channels, taking calls, talking to someone, getting up, going to the kitchen, grabbing a snack, coming back. I mean, we normally wouldn't do this if we were watching a movie, right? You don't, when you go to the movies, or if you're watching a movie at home, you try your best to stay connected. I mean, the movie draws you in. You don't want to get up and leave, especially now we could pause movies, but if you're at the movie theater, you don't want to get up and leave because you're going to miss something. I mean, we take it seriously. We try to stay connected and our attention on the movies. I mean, we should try our best even more so to stay focus our hearts on what we're seeing on our computers or the television, the services. We should not be that informal, even if we're not able to be seen by others. You know, we do a lot when, you know, we're alone. We sin privately in our minds. We say things, you know, when people can't hear us, we're emboldened. Nowadays, we go on social media and say things that are hurtful, or you don't really think of the consequences when no one's watching. I mean, the same applies here. When no one's watching, we should do the right thing, right? We should prepare ourselves. We should, when, you know, if it's a Wednesday or a Friday and we're home and we can't go out or we can't enjoy the fellowship meal at church, normally, you know, we probably would not have something that's non-Lenten on a Wednesday or a Friday or during a Lenten season. You know, we should try to do the same, to exercise our faith in our homes, in our personal lives, or as people say, our private lives, which I don't like the word private lives in a community, in a church that believes in communion and fellowship. Private life is not necessarily something that is a positive thing, but I think you understand what I mean by doing the right thing when alone or when no one's watching. So I think many of us have gotten good at doing this, at transforming our home into a church. Many of you are more advanced than I am in that regard. I have often said, I wish I had a little chapel in my home, because I find it personally, and this is me confessing, I guess, I find it hard praying in my home. And I know that many of you pray at home, you pray as a family. And that's a wonderful thing, to sit or stand or kneel as a family, a husband and a wife, or take your children and pray together. Your children will see you kneel, even when they're very young. They'll, you know, maybe they don't want to do it, and that's okay, but they'll see mom and dad kneel in front of an icon, and that will, you know, that will imprint on their hearts. They will know that, okay, so when they get older, they'll know how to do that too. So I know that many of you are very good at doing that, and you continue to improve. But I would say that what we're challenged to do today more than ever is not necessarily transform our homes into the church, but, you know, how do we take what we do and who we are in and through the church into the world? How do we make the world part of the church? How do we introduce the church into the world? And I think that many of our parishes have introduced humanitarian programs, outreach programs, food programs, especially as people are losing their jobs more and more, as people are on even more stringent, limited budgets, and they're not able to provide for their families as they were before. Our parishes have stepped up, our people have stepped up and have learned to give more. And, you know, that's not just feeding the hungry, you know, that's not just giving aid to those in need, that is really bringing Christ to them. And this is the great opportunity that I think COVID has given us. It's not how do we use technology better, although that's a great opportunity. We've all learned how to use Zooms and all the other technologies. Priests are you know, doing a lot more ministry online, and it's great, and they'll continue to do so for the future. But we have, you know, the great opportunity to learn how to be Christ's hands in the world, how to be caring, how to be philanthropic, how to be merciful. How do I bring the Eucharist, you know, communion with God through my presence in the world? And maybe they can't receive Holy Communion. They may not be Orthodox, so that they may not even want the sacrament of Holy Eucharist, some people. But how can I bring Christ to them? How can I help them meet Christ through my actions, through my life, from my demeanor? How do I teach Christ or Christian values to my colleagues when I'm interacting with them, perhaps via Zoom, or if I'm meeting people out in the office or on the street? This is the great challenge, that our in-person contact has become less frequent. We are doing less in-person interacting than before. And this means that every time we meet someone in person, we have to, really make an effort to be Christ-like, to make sure that that exchange would be an exchange between, anyone and Christ. How can they see in us the image of Christ and come to, learn about Christ or seek him? Because if we're in the world and we're interacting with the world and we're indifferent and we don't care about caring for others, or if we're not patient with others, if we're driven, by just getting things done, and we bypass people or we're rude with people, and on top of that they say, oh, you're a Christian, who you're not, we're not doing our job we're not fulfilling our calling to be disciples of Christ. So I think, the first thing that we can think about is, how do we understand that we can still be connected to Christ without, the thing that we're used to, the mechanics, the environment even that we're used to, as I said in my opening story, without having to use our fingers and our hands and the prayer rope, we could still connect to Christ in prayer. And we can do that in our homes. We can do that by transforming our homes physically into a space that has elements of the church in there, but also symbolically and spiritually transform our homes as a place where we seek forgiveness from one another, the husband from the wife from the husband, the children from each other, where we are communicating with one another, speaking with one another, patient with one another, listening to each other as a form of communion. But then also introducing the sacraments into our homes, asking the priest to come, maybe to pray with us in our home, to lead us in prayer and to offer sacraments. And lastly, and more importantly, I would say now more than ever, to work on the liturgy after the liturgy, not just in our home, in our apartments or our homes, but in the world. The liturgy after the liturgy has to occur in the world, because the church exists not necessarily for itself. Christ did not, the Son of God did not take on human nature, did not become man for himself. He became man and was crucified and died and was buried and rose from the dead for the world. And that is the great calling that we have today. We have this wonderful, unique opportunity to be a resurrectional church for a world that is really, really suffering. And our cities are suffering today because of a pandemic, because of we have increased violence in the streets, especially in some of our major urban centers. We have people who are hungry, who don't have the bare necessities. We need to be God's hands in the world. So I urge everyone to, have Christ in your homes, but then take Christ into the world. I don't have much more to share with you all, and I apologize if you were expecting to have a great theological treatise tonight. I thought I would share with you some of my thoughts, some of my own experiences, some of what I've struggled with, and really to have a greater opportunity to hear from you, to hear your questions. And I think that the moderator is able to take your questions and either read them out to me, or if you'd like, we can try to make you a panelist so I can see you and we can speak to each other. You can ask your question directly to me, and I'll try to do my best to answer. So I don't know if we have any questions that have come in already. Father Sam or Kristen or Tony, I don't know who is going to be helping us with the question, but I'm happy to take any question that anyone's willing to ask.
Hi, Eminence. Sorry. Okay, go ahead, Tony.
No, I was just going to say we've invited people to go ahead and post any questions that you have, and we're happy to invite any of our participants to ask the question live, or if you don't want to ask it live, you can type in the question and one of us will ask for you.
Yeah, you can offer it in the chat section. I don't know if chat is enabled to the panelists, but if you're embarrassed, no worries. You can try to do it anonymously. You could text it to someone and they'll ask it for you. But there aren't any dumb questions, just dumb answers that I'll give, and I'll try not to give any really bad answers.
I can start with a question of my own, if that's okay, while everyone gets a chance to think.
Sure.
I wonder if you have any encouragement for families who are struggling to get back to Sunday liturgy. I think some of us have gotten used to having Sunday at home. Some of our teens or kids are really out of the habit of dedicating Sunday morning to liturgy. Do you have any, I guess, advice or encouragement about that?
Yeah, I think it's tough because it's been March, and I would say March until maybe June. I don't recall when we actually were able to have greater participation in churches beyond, what the local authorities were only allowing 10 at some time at one point. But it's been several months for some families, and so what I recommend, especially for parents and for their kids, but also parents for themselves. Right? Sometimes it's the parents that are having the hard time going to church, not the teens or kids. Be patient. This is not, it was shocking for us when we were not able to go to church, and it took us. I remember the struggle, getting messages from people, the anguish, the frustration, the demanding to open the churches, and I said, you know what? This is normal. This is a natural response to something that's shocking. And now that people got used to that sort of quieted down. And now we can't expect them to go back to kind of a raging fire. So the gas is on for sure. Some people, some kids, some teens, some adults, some parents will take time to go back. And I think we have to set the example. The clergy, first and foremost. I mean, I would say that, the clergy got used to not seeing people. It was an easier, faster liturgy. We went in and out, right? So I remember so many of them said, it's easier. We don't have to do coffee hour, and now we have to more and more meet the people, talk to the people, spend time with the people. So the clergy also are getting back into the habit of what it's like to be in church on Sunday with people. And people are gonna, people are still afraid. People are hesitant. Some people are worried about the means of receiving the Eucharist. And I believe we have to be patient with them. Parents, if your kids, your teens are, struggling, talk to them, help them understand that, this is kind of normal. Don't make them feel that they're less, now Orthodox than they were before. I encourage you not to let them, not to instill fear in them that if you don't go to church, something bad's gonna happen. Don't guilt them. And I would say, don't even bribe them, right? I would say be parents, like, when you're trying to get your children to do something that they should, you do different things for different age groups, right? Teenagers, young adults, have a will, have a say, they're able to express that. And so, talk to them, help them understand that getting back into the habit is really beneficial, and setting the example will help them do that. So I see a lot of questions that are coming in, and I don't know if these are questions or
Well, Father,
comments.
I'll help
So if somebody can,
I'll help you moderate, or I'll help moderate.
okay.
The next question is, do you think the ethnic part of our faith communities makes it hard to do outreach with our church? That was from one of our panelists or our participants.
If the ethnic part of our church, meaning the Greek element of our church, if that makes it hard to do outreach, was that the question, Toni? Kind of, am I summarizing it?
I think so.
Repeat it.
Yeah. Do you think the ethnic part of our faith communities makes it hard for us to do outreach within our churches?
Well, I mean, I think we have churches in the Midwest and in various parts of the country, I'm sure, but very different than New York, where it's mostly, Greek. But our churches here in our metropolis are multicultural, multi-ethnic, maybe not so much into the heart of Chicago, but if you, the parishes I visited outside of Chicagoland have lots of culture and lots of different ethnicities represented in the pews. And I found that's been a blessing. I think for sure, if we believe the church is for us only, it's by us, for us, we paid for it, it's ours, it's like our ancestors built it, it's meant for us. And by us, I don't just mean Greeks or Russians or Serbs, I mean us Orthodox. If we think the church is exclusively meant for us, if Christ exclusively became man just for us, then that is going to be worse than, our ethnic identities. That's worse. That keeps us from doing more outreach. Because if we think the church is for us, we're content because we're there, right? I mean, if we feel that someone's missing from our community, we want to go out there and find them and bring them back, bring them in, or maybe they left and we bring them back. So it's the fear is not if the ethnic identities and the different cultures, or I don't know that you can ever say that there is an ethnicity or culture in a community. There's always going to be that, but I think that's less of a threat than the notion of exclusivity, feeling somehow that we are exclusively entitled to Christ. That keeps us from going out and doing outreach. And I would say that we have to be very careful. I mean, obviously there are things in our churches that only Orthodox Christian can participate in, like the sacraments. But again, bringing Christ into the world is sacramental. It's incarnational. Being present in the life of someone else, even if you're not giving the Holy Eucharist, is Eucharistic in many ways. You are bringing Christ to them, and hopefully they become an Orthodox Christian and they can come and receive the Eucharist and experience the fullness of that communion with God. But that's what I would say is more detrimental to outreach: the exclusive entitlement or feeling entitled to have Christ alone.
Great, thank you. We had one sort of a technical question, an anonymous question. She was saying that the wearing masks in church is really challenging and uncomfortable. And she wondered if there would be a way for the services to be quickened a little bit by only doing prayers in either English or Greek, not repeating them 2 times to just speed things along, if that was something that could be considered.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, we, every parish is different, right? So I don't know what some parishes only do it in one language. There are many parishes that only use English exclusively, right? That's what they normally do anyway. Others that use, more Greek than English. When I serve, especially Vespers, we have asked the clergy to inform the chanters that even the chanting would be done in a little faster pace, rather than drawing it out. We don't do the Anisandaria, for example, at Vespers. It Vespers. We read the psalm rather than chanting the opening psalm to help the service move along, because it is very difficult to wear a mask, and especially if you have children, if they want to move about the church, it's not as easy as it was before. So I think that that's a great idea, and we can talk about that with my priests. There isn't a real problem, especially if we're not exclusively doing one language over another to prove a point over kind of, superiority over one language over another. If it's a practical need, that's what we're going to do. It's the same thing as not having right now choirs. It's not because we don't want choirs or like choirs, but because we really can't have choirs or multiple chanters at the chanter stand. So I think that that falls in line with that. If there's a way to help move things along, to help make it physically a little easier in the church, we can consider that.
Thank you. And we have just one more question right now. It says, what lessons can we take from other times in history when the faithful were not able to attend divine liturgy? Maybe because they were in an unorthodox country or under persecution or traveling at sea for months at a time. Can you think just off the top of your head of some historical lessons that we can bring forward to our own times?
Oh, so lessons from the past where attending services was restricted or not what we were used to. I don't know. I would say, in recent history, it's probably war. I don't know what people were doing when bombs were falling. Some people say, oh, people were running to church. Okay. I don't know that. I wasn't in the war. But chances are when bombs were falling in a village, if it was on a Sunday, I don't know what they were doing. I know that in Serbia, there was bombing on Pascha. I think in recent history. I don't know if people were running to the when there major bombing in their cities. What I think the lesson ultimately is, Christ is everywhere. If the Holy Spirit is everywhere, filling all things, and we have to remember that. And it's hard to do that, of course, because we feel Christ more present when we're in that sacred space. What we learned is that space is made sacred not by some magical words or by trinkets, but that space is made holy, sacred by and through the presence of God. And God is present everywhere. I don't know how people endured when they can't go into that sacred space themselves. That's sanctify the church space, the Naol. And so I don't have a really good answer. I don't know what sailors would do when they were far off at sea. I'm sure those who were, trying to pray and they didn't have services or the Eucharist, were praying. I know the servicemen and women, when they are deployed and they can't go to church, sometimes they go and find a church if they're in an Orthodox country. Sometimes I know that servicemen and women have, gone to different services that were offered on the base, maybe led by a different pastor, and they weren't receiving the Eucharist, but to them, they needed the time to, hear the scripture, to hear a homily. It definitely doesn't replace going to an Orthodox church and participating in the sacrament. But I don't have any examples beyond that of what I can share. Maybe there's one on the call tonight who's a historian who has studied this more than I have, and I'm happy to have them come on and maybe answer the question better than I have.
No, that's great. Thank you. right, we have a couple more questions just came in. One actually is a follow-up to an earlier one from Alexander. He says, to clarify, how should we perform better outreach? I felt growing up, I mostly did exclusive Orthodox things that were insular to the church, much of it not religious or charity, like basketball with Goya. Are there any American charities that we can support locally run by our metropolis?
American charities, in other words, programs that are not directed to our faithful. If that's what you're saying, I think nowadays, I mean, I've seen parishes, they're not distributing food or giving clothing or caring for people and just our people. I think most of the charitable works that are occurring on a parish level are not insular. They're actually outward looking. Philoptochos, for example, indeed cares for parishioners in need and our people, quote unquote, our people, parishioners. But I think they do incredible work for, people who have nothing to do with the Orthodox Church. The Metropolis has created, the Project Hope. It's not, Father Sam, you called it an Orthodox supermarket. I think it's not grocery store. It's actually a little different than that. So, I mean, we partner with local charities, local kind of government officials or elected officials who have access to neighborhoods, who understand the needs of neighborhoods and citizens that are outside of our community. And so our focus there has been, yes, give food and aid to our parishioners, but also identify individuals who can partner with individuals and organizations who can identify greater needs beyond us. And so that's what Project Hope is. We receive food and other aid, and we help distribute it to members of society that are not Orthodox Christians necessarily. And I think most parishes, I think St. Haralambos, I saw somewhere, St. Haralambos in Niles has delivered 10 tons of food thus far during COVID, which is amazing. One small parish. I mean, I doubt that they gave that food just to Orthodox Christians. And in fact, it's very hard to find our families who are in need. Our families tend to be very proud. They don't ask. I know that Holy Apostles in Westchester has the Feed 6, I think it's called, Feed 6 or Feed 7. Feed 6, is it Feed 5 or it's 6? Okay. Where they work and they're preparing meals. Those meals are not going just to parishioners or members of our ethnic group. They're going to anyone who needs them. So I would say maybe in the past our works mainly focused on our own parish needs, going and helping and volunteering at your parish. But I think there are enough opportunities. I think parishes have stepped up and are offering opportunities for our young adults and our families and even children to now help those in need beyond our church.
Thank you. We have lots of questions rolling in now.
I see some of them in the chat section. I don't know. So make sure, Toni, you're looking at the chat section,
looking at
the Q&A
both.
section. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I encourage somebody, send a message saying I'd like to be on the screen. We'll make you a panelist. It makes it a little easier for me. I feel like I am losing my mind when not speaking to somebody directly, seeing their expression. If I said something that's wrong, I kind of will be able to adjust if I see you rather than not.
Okay, well, let me start with this. I don't know if we're prepared to get somebody up right now. I'll start with this one and then we'll see if the next person can come online. I can chat with them. This one's from Thomaidi.
Sure.
Can you give other examples of specific elements and practices that encourage an Orthodox Christian home? Perhaps even a memorable or impactful experience from your upbringing?
Yeah, I think the most memorable and impactful moment in my family life, hands down, above and beyond anything, was my father's desire to receive confession before dying. And he was in the home, and he asked to see a priest. And I was 16 years old, and the priest came to see him 2 days or 3 days, I don't recall, before he died, and gave him the sacrament of confession and the Eucharist. That to me was impactful. You know, as a 16-year-old teenager, I saw that, and it followed me for much of my young adult life, and I still remember that moment. I think in the house, I think it's you know, I think we had someone who's a therapist, a clinical psychologist, or something. I mean, they'll probably tell you better than I. You know, what children observe impacts them. You know, what they hear coming out of the parents' mouths to each other, or to them, to the children, directed to them, impacts them. And so I think being mindful of what we say, how we act around each other in the house versus in the public. So sometimes we wear masks in the public. We're kind to each other. We present ourselves as, you know, a loving family. And the public is, we don't want people to think that we're having trouble. And then when we go home, we take off those masks and we become monsters. Actually, that's when we become the true self. We become a monster. So in the home, I would say, be careful how you speak to one another. Really be Christian in your home, and love one another, forgive one another, and, you know, I think it's important to have the priest sometimes in the home more than you might think. You know, sitting down with the family, talking with the family, listening to the family, asking him questions as a family. You know, usually when we're with the priest, we talk about problems of the church, big problems. Oh, why can't we do this? When are we going to do that? Can you help this program? You know, how are we going to raise money for the roof? Blah, blah, blah. But bring the priest into your home and engage him, open your heart, and, you know, have a nice conversation about more important, loftier matters. I think those are ways to make the home to a church.
Great, we have somebody that would like to ask a question live. So
Okay.
Theophany's gonna bring him up to panelist. Here we are, this is Steve. Steve, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Unmute and also start my video.
There you are. Welcome.
Thank you. And good evening, Your Grace.
Hi.
How are you today?
Good evening, Steve. Good evening. I'm doing well. How are you? Can you tell me where you're from, or what church or parish, or where are you calling in from?
I'm actually Antiochian, and we're over in the Davenport area, Davenport and Rock Island area. And I go to both churches, St. George,
okay,
also to Assumption. And I've been able to at least now go to your services, where we've been sort of only with one priest once a month, and it's been sort of hard. So my question is, have you heard anything recently from the pandemic community that will allow us to have more people come to the services instead of every other pew, maybe 6 foot apart in each pew, where you could at least get twice the amount of people per service? It seems, I know it's very hard and people are trying to be very careful, but then you have the select few that don't feel that masks are making any difference. But I'm in the protected class and wear a mask anywhere I go, and I shake my head sometimes, but I still feel that that closeness that we get going at the church, even if we're close and can't meet afterwards, it's there. It's something to do with being as a community with the priest and doing all of our pandemic things we have to do by sanitizing our hands, wearing a mask. But that just feel of being in the church with other people, more than 2 or 3, makes it so much more special for everybody.
Yeah, so Steve, thank you for the question and for coming on to the screen. I can see you and answer you personally. We have not heard anything from kind of our local estate officials, city, state, municipality officials, about lifting, these types of restrictions, nor have we heard anything from the medical community suggesting, that social distancing is no longer necessary and no longer helpful, or the use of a masks are, not good or necessary. What we see is a continued either requirement or strong encouragement to do things or avoid certain things. And, we as a metropolis are looking at ways that we can potentially approach the officials and show what steps we're taking. Number one, to be good citizens, to care for others, not just our own. We have, I know the policies, the protocols, the checklists have really taken their toll on clergy, the parish teams, getting them certified, making sure they're following protocol. But really, we're doing that, and we're showing that as a church, we're doing our best to be good citizens, right? And we want to find a way that we can share that information with our authorities to then potentially ask for greater capacity in our churches. I don't think that increasing capacity will mean, eliminating social distancing. I think that is something that is a kind of a gold standard right now. We're not going to be able to say masks off because, that's still the best practice. Mm-hmm. And so we are working on how we can maybe increase the number of people in the spaces of our churches. But, I've heard priests saying to me, we don't have a mad dash to church. I mean, people are not just rushing to come back full steam ahead. And that was one of the questions we heard earlier. How do you get people back into the habit of going back to church? So people have either not gotten back into the habit or are still scared to go back to church. And so right now we have to, we're going to continue to study how we might approach the officials, see what we might present to them, and see if that could increase our capacity. But I really don't, I have not heard anything coming from anyone, or, state, city officials saying that in place are not going to be necessary. I mean, unfortunately, it sounds like, unless we have certain things in place, like a vaccine or, I don't know what else could be out there that could help us eliminate some of these things and have the closer feel physically close with each other. I mean, some churches have the kiss of peace or the exchange of a handshake, in some of the services, and that they can't do. And that's kind of weird for them, and it takes away from the intimacy of being in church.
Same with us. Yeah. It's just very hard not to be able to handshake, or at least if you could do an elbow bump or something like that. But thank you very much. Maybe soon. I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you again.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for your question.
Yeah, we actually have a follow-up question on the same topic from David, who we're going to bring up here. Hopefully.
I see. Did he write the question, or is
he did?
Is he going to come on, or did he write the question?
Yeah, here we go. Here's David.
Okay. All right. Is he on? Okay.
Good evening, Your Eminence.
Oh, I see David's picture.
Please bless.
Hey, David. How are you?
Very, very well.
Bless you. Where are you from? Where are you calling from, or where are you dialing in from?
I'm from Minneapolis, and I go to St. Mary's Greek.
St. Mary's Greek. I like that. I like how you call each other St. Mary's Greek, St. Mary Antiochian. Yeah,
Yes.
St. George Greek. I like that.
Yeah, we're blessed with a
So
lot of,
thank you for David.
definitely. Definitely. See, I have a question in follow up to the recent question that was just asked.
Mm-hmm.
Can you address an underlying issue that seems to be presenting itself not only on the streets and at the workplaces, but even in our parishes, I think right now, um, with regards to how exactly we are to be mindful of the different protocols, as you say, recommendations, mandates, requirements, even encouragements that the authorities are issuing. There seems to be division of mentality right now among people in regards to that. I was hoping you could offer us some guidance and some wisdom and some encouragement on how to deal with that tendency we might have to start second guessing those authorities or any particular one authority?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, David. I think, well, first of all, every time I speak to our medical kind of advisors, I mean, no one, they are truly humbled by this virus. I mean, they don't pretend to know everything about it. They are learning new things about it every day. I had a doctor the other day who told me he lost a 2-month-old baby to COVID in the hospital. You know, they never expected something like this. They're learning more and more good things and challenging things, right? And so we definitely no one I think is out there speaking as the definitive authority, and if they are, you know, they're fooling themselves, right? When it comes to this, I think even the our response to this pandemic has, you know, it has shifted along the way, you know, and we're learning things as we go, and we are adapting, um, and adopt revision, public health protocols or ecclesiastical protocols. And for example, I'll give you an example. I mean, when we first, you know, were offering protocols, we restricted the distribution of antitheron and artoclasia. And, you know, we wanted to be very careful about what we're doing. You know, we restricted a lot up front. We limited a lot up front because we wanted to be careful. We were not, you know, sure how our parishes would be able to handle crowds, how they would handle people moving inside the church. So we restricted some of that. You know, we provided very detailed, as detailed as we could, you know, directions, because we wanted to try to answer questions. You know, someone's question is, you know, someone else's common sense. You know, it's easily answered, but it's not for everyone. There are people who, you know, argue against certain things, whether it's the use of face covering, the need to social distance, and I have said from the very beginning. I mean, I would, one day history will judge me, or the community will judge me, or, you know, God will judge me for sure. And I will have to stand in front of my maker. And I know that there are a lot of things that he's going to judge me on, a lot of things that I have done, and a lot of things I have not done, and things that in the future I'll do and not do, and fall short of the mark. But one of the things that I felt the responsibility, you know, pulling me, the immense responsibility I have, not only to our faithful, the community, the people of the church, but people in general. I mean, as the metropolitan of our metropolis, I'm responsible, yes, for the 58 parishes and 2 monastic communities, as Father Sotiri mentioned, but I'm responsible really to be the leader of our community in the world, and we have a responsibility to others. Yeah, and so I mean, if history judges me, if people on Facebook judge me, I mean, I get this all the time. I see it, and they judge me as being, you know, naive or harsh, or a despot or whatever they say, or too strict, or I will be okay with that. I will accept that criticism and hopefully learn for the next time. But I can't. I want to find. I always wanted to err on the side of caution. So if you look at what parishes are doing now, we allowed them now to have outdoor activities. Some parishes, in the beginning, they weren't doing that at all. First of all, the authorities wouldn't let us do that. We couldn't have, we were talking about drive-through picking up of the light for Pascha, and we were told no. And so now we're doing not only, go to church, but there are parishes that have had, outdoor activities, including meetings. Philoptochos have met outside, youth activities going on. So we are shifting a metropolis kind of policies as things are becoming better known to us, as people are becoming more used to living during a pandemic. If you come down to, I don't know how it is up in Minneapolis, but if you walk downtown Chicago, people are wearing masks walking their dog, right? They're not doing it because they get COVID from their dog, but they're doing it just in case they meet someone along the way at the curb. They want to make sure that they are doing their responsibility to someone else. And I feel the same thing has to happen with our church. So, we haven't gotten to the point where the floodgates are open and, COVID is no longer a problem. When that happens, God willing, very soon, we will lift these restrictions. But right now we have to slowly lift restrictions or adapt, shift the restrictions as things change. So I don't know if that answered your question. I would just say, people have to, we speak about obedience and as a virtue in the church. And I like it. It's like obedience, we say, I'm obedient to myself, right? Or obedient to you when I like what you're telling me to do. And, as a leader, the spiritual leader, the father here, I can't force somebody to do something. I'm not going to arrest someone. I do that. When there's really bad behavior, I have to take action. But people have free will, and that exists, every single day of our lives. I try my best to help people understand why we're doing certain things. If they can't understand it, then I have to do a better job of explaining it again. If they still don't understand it, then, we got to make sure that they're not at least putting others at risk. If they refuse, right? If they refuse to do something, well, then don't put someone else at risk, and I've had, people have said, people are not coming to our church, they're going to the ex-church, that other, jurisdiction, because they have less stringent rules. And I said, well, that's great. They're finding a way to, be a member of the church, and they feel, that's better. I wish they'd come back eventually, but I think if that's the way another community is another church hierarchy or community is handling COVID, I'm not going to judge them. I have to keep focused on what's in front of me and be responsible for caring for all of you. And, we'll do our best.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Eminence. Stay well.
Thank
All
you.
right, we have two final questions coming up. The next one is from Sarah. We're kind of looping back to the conversation about activities within our home and how to, in our Orthodox practice in our home. And I think actually it was more of a suggestion to share, which we appreciate. So Sarah, welcome. Oh, we need to unmute you, Sarah.
Mute. There we go. Sorry. Hi, how are you?
Good, welcome.
Hi, Sarah.
Okay. I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. I go to St. Nicholas Parish. One of the things that's helped us, because I'm high risk, I have rheumatoid arthritis and take medication that immunosuppresses me, so I can't really leave the house as much as I like to, except for work. But one of the things that's helped us is the prayer app that the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America provides. And it's actually helped me teach my son some of the prayers that are out there. Like, well, he actually knows the Nicene Creed. And that's really good for his age. He's in second grade. But it's a big help because a lot of times when you're with a lot of the struggles that are going on, it's hard to focus. And especially at the end of the day, is the time that we can pray as a family, and that has really helped us. And then it also has the Bible reading, so it's all right there, and we read the Bible together. Yeah, it's great. I love it.
Is it the one called Daily Readings with the gold cross and the blue background?
Yeah, there's one. I think you have to purchase one. There's like one that has more stuff than another one. There's two different ones. There's one that's like $2 or something. But yeah, it's really helpful. I mean, I use the full app because it has all prayers, and then it gives you all the dates, and it tells you if it's a fast day or a feast day, and what you can eat and what you can't eat, and that can be confusing too.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great tip. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have one final
Thank you,
question.
Sarah.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Sarah.
Oh,
One
thank you.
question from Catherine. So let's bring Catherine up. Hi, Catherine.
Hello, good evening. I'm from
Hi, Catherine.
hi. I'm from Ascension of Our Lord in Lincolnshire. I'm up in Arlington Heights, and I'm the director of the Sunday school program at our church. And I've a couple of little problems that we've run into is that since the beginning of July, we had to place my father in the Greek American nursing home. And it's been a little rough. My grandfather was a priest in Greece. My father grew up in the church, and he was a chanter at St. Karalabos for many years. Never a day would go by when he wouldn't get up in the morning and napselni, when he's getting dressed and everything. This is how I grew up, with listening to him chanting and everything. We learned a lot from him, not necessarily going to Greek school or Sunday school that many years, but my parents did teach us a lot. And now that he's in the nursing home, I feel that we're not able to, they can't have liturgy in the nursing home yet. We're not able to go in there and visit him, obviously. So we just visit him outside in the courtyard behind the fence. We can only see him for like a half an hour, which I can understand. It's very difficult for the elderly though, but it's also difficult for us to see that. I feel like here it was, yesterday was the feast day for Sophia and her daughters, and he didn't know, and nobody's reminding him of that. And to me, that's kind of like, how do we make it more of a church for him while he's there? What else can we do in the meantime? And it's so difficult to see that he's not a part of, our everyday life, number one, but that was a part of his life. And now it's not, and I feel like he's missing out on so much too. I mean, he has some dementia, and I know he forgets things, but let me tell you, you put him up there and he starts chanting, he knows. It all comes flooding back to him. It's amazing to listen to him sometimes, and he's almost 91, so God bless him, he's lived a long life. But it's so hard, like, what else can we do for somebody that's, in this predicament where you kind of like, what else can we do? I mean, we've taken some icons for him for his room, but not being able to go in there and help him and remind him all the time. Do you have any suggestions what can be done, or what we can do for him?
Yeah, I think, thank you for your question, Catherine. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Am I still connected?
Yes,
Okay,
you
great.
are.
I wasn't sure. I did want to say, the nursing homes, I think each of them has a different policy. I don't know how that policy is shifting at the Greek American Rehab Center. Obviously, they're not allowing services. We know that.
Right.
But I visited someone at another nursing home with the consent of the family. They asked me to visit their loved one, and I gave them a Holy Communion. So I know that in the past you couldn't see them at all. They couldn't have outdoor guests. I don't know what the rules are, you know, with the Greek American Rehab Center, but I think Father Sotiri, one of the good ideas maybe you can bring to one of our Syndesmos meetings is how can the parishes provide, you know, any materials, and again, assuming that these nursing home rehab centers will take them, how can we provide something for those in the nursing home so that they can feel or the presence of the church there, whether it's you know, a CD that they could play with church music. How can, you know, priests should actively, you know, reach out to some of the families where they know they have loved ones in these nursing homes and see if they would like a visit, if visits are allowed. I know that the nursing homes are being very, very cautious because that is where most of the deaths have occurred. You know, our members of our loved ones in these rehab centers and nursing homes, because they are indeed most vulnerable. So I just don't know what the Greek American Rehab Center allows. If they allow a visit from the priest, by all means, reach out to, you know, let Father Sotiri know to go visit.
And he has, not to interrupt you, but he has, and he's come over and he's communed my father, which my father was just like crying, you know, and my mom, of course. And it is a very humbling thing to see that, you know, here's somebody that grew up in the church and now it can't even, you know, you can't even be a part of it. And I know he misses us as family, but I know how much he misses his church too. So I didn't know if there was, but I thank you for your suggestion. That is a very good suggestion. Maybe that's something I can ask Father Sotiri about to help over there. We can find that out. Thank you.
Thank
Kalos
you.
Bravi.
And let us know what, thank you. Let us know what you find out so we can pass it along, because obviously there are a lot of our loved ones at the nursing home, and we could pass on the information to the priests, and just Father Sotiri and Father Sam, Father Sotiri Malami and Father Sotirios Dimitriou can kind of talk about this, what they discover, and talk about it with the brotherhood.
Thank you very
say
much.
Something?
Yes.
Your Eminence, if I can say something real
Sure.
quick. There's what I know that some of my parishioners who are in nursing homes, people that have been in the hospital for one reason or another, that they always look forward to, because they know that a lot of times the clergy aren't allowed on the floor, depending what floor they're on. But their family will drop them off an iPad. They're able to video stream. Maybe that's a suggestion for the Athletic nursing home. Great.
I know that they do put on they have the Dish Network there. So they do put on the Greek liturgy that comes directly from there. But I mean, from what I've heard is that they'll put them into the activity room where the television is, a big screen TV. And, but I mean, being on the memory care floor, you have to have somebody that is going to encourage the resident to participate. And I think that maybe that's not happening as much as how we would like it, of course. But I just find that, you know, there's nobody there to remind him of the feast days and the holidays. And it's not like him being at home where we would always just kind of always on a daily basis do this. And I just felt maybe there was some way, and then now in my dad's condition, someone would have to be there to explain to him personally what's going on in the church, you know, and, oh, they're doing this. And then maybe if it was, you know, the Greeks, of course, in the Greek language, he would listen to it, he would understand where he's at the church during the liturgy. But it's kind of difficult. And now, like you say, Your Eminence too, being in the situation, thank God we can still at least visit him right now. But it just makes it so difficult to not be able to be there and to support him in that way, and to make him feel like his home there now is also his church. That's why I kind of wanted to bring that up and ask the question, and I appreciate the suggestions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're trying to want to wrap up. I know I want to be conscious of everybody's time. I lost track of one question that we want to slip in here, and then Christine will, when you're done answering that one, then we'll have Christine kind of wrap up and talk about what the next event will be next month. So the final question from Jeannie is, with all the virtual streaming available to participate in liturgy, now more than ever, we can encourage our young adults who are in college to attend. There's no excuses. Does the Metropolis have an organized outreach program to connect and encourage these young adults who are away from home to take advantage of the streaming to stay connected to church?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, I don't know how many of our young adults, college kids are back on campus. I know there are completely taking classes virtually, others who are on campus and taking classes in the dorm room, others who are going to class 2 days a week, others, and so there's, a lot of different, measures in place on campuses. I think the Metropolis does not have a college campus ministry, but there is OCF, Orthodox Christian Fellowship, which is the college campus ministry of the Assembly of Bishops, and so by virtue of being of the Assembly of Bishops, it's our ministry as well. I know that there are letters that go out every year to our parish priests, requesting information from them. Who are your college students? What college campus are they on? How do we get in touch with them so that they can then plug them into the local OCF chapter? I saw a couple of parishes. I noticed some of them are actively also asking families to let them know, the priest know that what kids are in college, because the priest doesn't know everyone and doesn't know what campus every college kid is on. So I would say, if you wanted to start locally, approach your parish priest and let them know, hey, I have a nephew or a niece or a kid, my own kid that's that's going to college. Here's how to get in touch with them. Would you please give them a call? Okay, and I think that's the easy thing for us to do. The clergy, I think, would more than happily reach out and speak to that young person and remind them and say, hey, if you didn't know, this is how you can connect to the services. This is our schedule for Bible studies, or anything that you want, like updates, go to this website, and I think, but unless because we don't have permanent chaplains on campuses around the country that do this every day as part of their full-time job, really the initiative has to be, the parents informing the priest, or the priest soliciting that information from their parishioners at large. I would say do that, and I'm sure any priest that you approach will be more than happy to call a college person and stay in touch with them. I know Philoptochos sends care packages to our college campus, our kids on campuses, and so this is indeed a good way for them to stay connected. And like you said, no excuse. You can turn on your computer and watch. I mean, it's important for us to encourage them to not just roll out of bed, and maybe they can watch very carefully and pay attention as if they were in church as well. So that's something that could be encouraged, and direction could be given by the priest.
Great. I think that wraps up our questions. Thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you to everybody who is on live with us and listening. Christine, take us away.
Well, I want to thank Toni for jumping in to moderate those questions so beautifully, and thank His Eminence for his time and sharing his wisdom. I also want to thank all our participants for attending, and do mark your calendars for our October Parenting University. It'll be October 16th, Friday night. We'll be having Dr. Randa Anderson. She has a wonderful presentation entitled Meeting Today's Challenges, How to Thrive, Not Just Survive. And I've seen previews of her presentation. You will be entertained, you will learn new things, you'll be inspired. And so, oh, there's the flyer, thank you. Definitely plan for that, and we look forward to seeing you all again in about a month.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. God bless you all.
Thank you
Your
very much.
Eminence. Your blessings.
Thank you.